But even this building, imagine, modern buildings are built with a lot of toxic material. A lot of toxic material in these buildings. Bombs fall on Gaza. But it's not just the bombs that create the problem. The entire population of 2 million are breathing in carcinogenic compounds from the buildings as they collapse. The whole of the Palestinian population in Gaza is getting cancer. All of them. Everybody. That's why it doesn't matter when you say, what's the death count? It's irrelevant. 2.3 million Palestinians are going to get cancer because they're breathing in carcinogenic material. That never gets talked about. Modern building is filled with dangerous substances. It's all over the air. When you watch the buildings collapse, all that dust is flying around. In Iraq, I remember the dust that flies around. People breathe it in. It's appalling. Yeah? That's one thing. The dust. Dangerous, dangerous dust. The second thing is the noise. It is impossible to convey to people the sound of a bomb dropping. It is impossible. And most militaries, the Israelis and the Americans, bomb at night. Now, if any of you have ever raised a child, and especially in affluent parts of the world, there's that whole routine. Child has dinner, then there's bath, then there's a book reading, then the lights go out, then there's silence, then you might sing them a song. Nini baba nini, makkan roti chini, mera baba so gaya, makkan roti ho gaya. He's gone. And then, boom. 3 miles away, 5 kilometers away, it starts. The whole house shakes. Those children are being tormented. They have had over a year of atomic bomb sounding noises. The sound waves that smash against the body damage the internal organs. I mean, this stuff is impossible to convey to people if you haven't, because that noise it's not an ordinary noise. It's an unbelievably loud sound. And a sound wave from a bomb landing is an incredible feeling on your body. You destroy the insides of your body. You can bleed inside because it's so intense. And for little kids, it's devastating. There are pictures of kids walking around with cracked skin. There was a girl, the recent video of a girl walking, she had cracked skin on her feet. And the journalist talked about that. But if you looked at her carefully, her skin above the thing was also cracked. It's not dry skin. It's the sound waves that just create havoc on your physiognomy, however you say it, the whole thing. So the noise, the dust, the war zone is not a place just of death. It's a place of negativity. Nothing is happening. And in Gaza, it's worse. When the Yanks bombed Mosul, when they were trying to chase out the Islamic State, at least the residents of Mosul could run into the countryside and take cover. That's what they did. They ran out of the city of Mosul, took cover under trees and so on. There is no countryside in Gaza. There is nowhere to run. The Israelis have become so completely hardened that they are routinely bombing places that they declared to be safe. That's what's happening in Gaza. Why? That's the question that I have been struggling with. Why? The first thing I would say to you is don't even think about, is it the Americans? Are the Americans being pushed by the Israelis? Are the Israelis pushing? That is a bogus debate. They are working together. This is not about who's the dog, who's the tail. This is a waste of energy. People get tied up in knots on this ridiculous so-called conundrum. It's not a conundrum. They are working together. The Yanks are playing a duplicitous game. Blinken says, we are coming here to negotiate peace. You are not negotiating peace. You can't negotiate peace when you have bombs in your suitcase. You're handing the bombs over and saying, ceasefire, please do. How can you tell them to do a ceasefire when you're arming them? This is a nonsensical thing. They are working together. Why? It's not why Israel and why the Yanks and why they are all working together. The German foreign minister today arrives in Beirut. Horrible, horrible person. She just said in the German parliament that if there is a combatant in Gaza, whether Hamas or Islamic Jihad or just somebody with a gun, and there are, having been into those parts of the world, I can tell you there's just a lot of people who are angry, who are just taking their hunting guns and firing into the sky. You know they can't hit the drones. The ones that are above, not like the ones that come into building where Shinwar threw the stick at it. Shinwar's stick. What a gesture. He's got one hand, he's sitting on a chair, his torso is bleeding, and he throws a stick at the drone. That image, leaked by an Israeli soldier, has made Shinwar a hero around the world. Just that image. I mean, that was a huge strategic error by the Israelis. They thought they'll release this, and with the pictures of the handbag. What the hell is that, man? The Israelis have the worst propaganda. But unfortunately, because the Yanks are working with them and the Yanks can do propaganda really well, they clean up for the Israelis. The Israelis are really stupid. I don't know why there's this myth of the Israelis being like so smart and intelligent. They are stupid. It was stupid to kill Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. But they have their reasons, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. Why? Yeah? But it was stupid. It's as stupid as the Yanks. Like, seriously? You were so stupid that you destroyed both of Iran's enemies? 2001, you took out the Taliban. That was on Iran's eastern border. And then 2003, you took out Saddam on Iran's western border. Obviously, Iran celebrated and said, okay, now we're going to build a bridge from Iran through Iraq into Syria to southern Lebanon. We stretch our wings. And having stretched the wings, the Yanks said, no, go back to your borders. Why? You just took out our adversaries. We hated Saddam, we hated the Taliban, now we are free. Now put your wings back home. And I'm going to come back to this Iran thing in a minute, okay? But the main thing is, these people made enormous miscalculations. They are not invincible. Israeli soldiers are dying despite the fact that they're pummeling the Palestinians from the sky. They can destroy from the air. They don't know how to fight on the ground. Hezbollah fighters in South Lebanon are engaging the Israelis and scaring them. Because the one thing the Israelis, just like the Americans, don't like is to die. But when you bomb a people and kill tens of thousands, then what is life for that community but fighting for your dignity? The Yemenis were asked, Ansar Allah spokesperson was asked, why are you guys trying to attack Israel? You'll get bombed. He gave the best answer. He said, what will you bomb? The Saudis have bombed everything. You can keep bombing Yemen, but we are dignified. We're going to defend Palestine. They don't give a shit. They're like, you've destroyed everything. You killed so many people. You can't bomb Sana'a. If you bomb Sana'a, that's worse than the Taliban destroying the Bamiyan Buddha in Afghanistan. Sana'a is a beautiful, historical, UNESCO-protected city. But every other part of Yemen has been bombed. If not by the Saudis, before that by the Yanks. Remember, it's in Yemen that the Yanks, under Obama, took out a 16-year-old boy, a US citizen, who was sitting and eating a snack on the side of the road with his cousin. 16-year-old US citizen, the son of Anwar al-Awlaki, who had previously been assassinated, US citizen, under the orders of Obama. That was in the eastern part of Yemen. Then the Saudis bombed the north. What's left? The Yanks don't want to bomb Aden because their few, 2 or 3 allies are sitting there. What else are you going to bomb? We're going to keep fighting you. That's the attitude of the combatants in Gaza, of Hezbollah. They're like, you killed Syed Hassan Nasrallah, we're coming for you. But the Israelis don't want to die. They are like the Americans. They think the savages should die, but they shouldn't die. They want to bomb from the air. They want to wipe all of us savages off the planet Earth. They believe there's an international division of humanity, that they are superior and the rest of us are beasts, animals. We deserve to be killed. But they can't die. And if they have that attitude, then they don't want their soldiers to die. So when their soldiers die, they get scared and pull out. That's exactly what they did in northern Gaza. Moment their soldiers started to die, phase 3 of the war ended. They don't want to die, they just want to pulverize. And now, having miscalculated with Gaza, Netanyahu is trying to change the basis of this war. But why? It's a real question. Why? Nobody can answer this categorically. It's difficult to say, this is why. So we have to have a theory. What is the theory? Inside Israel, and let's start there, so-called liberal Israelis make the argument now that Netanyahu is doing this to protect his political career. That sounds stupid. That's a way to make Israel not appear complicit in its own war, as if the Israeli population is not 100% behind this, or 85% behind this, or 90% behind it. This is not Netanyahu's war. This is Israel's war. They can't put this on Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a beast, but they can't put it on him. This is their war. They have to own it. Why are they not going out into the streets and blocking their own soldiers? Why are they not telling their soldiers, their children, don't go and fight there? It's their war. The whole country is going to have to answer for it. This is not just Netanyahu's war. That's important. So why? Why has Israel decided this is okay? This genocide is okay. Why are they celebrating in nightclubs? When first Ismail Haniyeh was killed, then Shinwar, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, celebrating in nightclubs. Why? What is going on here? It's that phrase, international division of humanity. I've come to believe that this phrase helps me understand a little bit of why these people feel they can bomb us like this. How Trump used the mother of all bombs in eastern Afghanistan, dropping it on villages, obliterating an entire district, not allowing journalists in, and saying to the world media, repeated by US media, that there was no civilians there, we just killed ISIS. How can you bomb a district in Afghanistan that has no people? If you believe that, you've never been to Asia. There are very few places in Asia where there's no people. I mean, really very few. Maybe like on Mount Everest. Those are all sort of Swiss climbers or whatever. Maybe some people from this country who like tramping. But every other part of Asia is filled with people, man. You can't bomb a whole district that has zero. If you go to the UN, they'll tell you the population of the district that was bombed. Then we'll see if they ever do a census again, what the numbers are now. Nobody was allowed to go to the crater that Trump created. International division of humanity. Some people are human, others are not treated as human. They are expendable. They are expendable. They create children in order to fight us, says the Israelis. They are starting to see the Palestinians as a lesser form of humanity, that they can be erased. The Israelis have now a plan, a thought, that they need to expand their borders. They talk about it regularly. As we are sitting here, the Israelis are holding a conference on how to rebuild Gaza for them. Rebuild the settlements, hotels along the Mediterranean seafront. You don't even need to think about oil and things like that. Gaza is a beautiful place. It's a tiny little place, but it's beautiful. Anybody who's been to the Mediterranean knows that is one of the most beautiful parts of the planet Earth. When I lived 2 years in Beirut, it was gorgeous. You go for a walk on the Corniche, Mediterranean lapping against the edge. It's a beautiful part of the world. Imagine the hotels they'll build. Before Gaddafi was overthrown, his son Saif al-Islam Gaddafi trained in Britain, who brought all these neoliberals in, who then betrayed them. Mahmoud Jibril and others came from, he was a Libyan but working for the Qataris. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi brought them all to Tripoli. Why? He said, we're going to make Kuwait on the Mediterranean. We're going to build hotels. The hotels will go from Tripoli all the way to Alexandria. It's going to be like a big, beautiful private beach complex. This is the fantasy that they've had for a long time. They believe Palestinians shouldn't be there. They don't deserve the water. If you go to Ramallah or you go to, Bethlehem or Jenin or anywhere and you talk to young kids, they've never seen the sea. I mean, they live like basically an hour drive from the Mediterranean. They've never seen the sea because they are caged in the West Bank. They are not permitted to go there. They can't meet their families that are inside the 48 lines. Very difficult. Some people do. It's very difficult to go across the lines. Almost impossible. There's a view that's grown in Israel that the Palestinians just need to be removed. They need to go somewhere else. It's an extraordinary thing for them to be thinking. I mean, Israel has a serious problem inside Israeli society. When it was founded in 1948, it had a complex relationship to religion and the state. It never actually declared that it's a Jewish state. It said it's a secular state. Ben Gurion and others said, no, it's got to be a secular state. They didn't declare publicly it's a Jewish state, but all the laws gave enormous privileges to Jews. So that Palestinians, despite UN Resolution 194, right to return, couldn't return, but Jews from all over the world could come and get benefits. That's effectively a Jewish state, but they never declared it. They've always kept it slightly ambiguous. Over the years, because the right has strengthened its hold in Israeli society, there are more and more laws that basically prejudice Palestinians, which is why eventually Amnesty International and so on started to call Israel an apartheid state. That was a technical use of the term, not a moral use. It was an apartheid state because the laws are differentially applied, that's all. They weren't making a judgment about whether Israel was a good or bad place. They weren't using it as a slogan. It was a technical, legal definition. Over the years, we've seen this attitude grow in Israel. They just want the Palestinians to disappear. The idea has been, if you give the Palestinians sufficient doses of pain, they will make a strategic calculation. It's better to move from here and go live in United States, Europe, maybe Kuwait, somewhere else. But you don't want to suffer sitting in Nabi Saleh and having no access to water. You just leave enough pain. It's the attitude that the United States has to Cuba. If you create enough pain for the 11 million Cubans, they'll surrender the revolution. That's the attitude the Israelis have had for a long time. They want the Palestinians gone. Why are they doing this? Because they want to remove the Palestinians. When Golda Meir said there is no such thing as a Palestinian, that was a foreshadowing of this. They want the Palestinians gone. This is not a two-state solution or a one-state solution. This is what I think of as a three-state solution. The states of Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. Send the Palestinians there. The rest of it is Eretz Israel. The Israelis, in fact, want a part of Jordan. They want to go to the other side, have both banks of the Jordan River, so that the Jordanians can't control the headwaters. Already, if you look at a map, it's a very interesting map. If you go deep into the map of Lebanon, if you look at southern Lebanon, there's a place called Methuselah's Finger. So, if you look at the map, this is the blue line, the so-called delimitation line between Israel and Lebanon. The line is pretty straight from the Mediterranean inwards. And then suddenly Israel pokes its finger into Lebanon, Methuselah's finger. What is that? That's the headwaters. They control the water there. They control the start of the river. They would never permit the Lebanese to control that. So they kept this part of Lebanon for themselves. In fact, they've been trying for years. When they occupied in 1982, they've been trying to expand their control south of the Litani River, take more of the headwaters of the Jordan River and other waterways. They don't want the Palestinians there. They want them to go. That is the ultimate form of ethnic cleansing. That's a war crime that violates about 50 UN resolutions about this conflict, not general resolutions. Since 1967, Israel is violating about 50 resolutions about this conflict. There are violations of general international law, separate. But this conflict resolutions are being violated one after the other. They don't care. Why are the Yanks backing them? That's the main thing. The main thing isn't Israel. We all understand. Israel basically wants the whole thing. Doesn't want Palestinians. Does not want to create a one state. Because if they incorporate the Palestinians, then they'll feel the demographic advantage of the Palestinians will be too great. And this ambiguity around the Jewish state could not be maintained. If you have 50% Palestinians, 50% Israeli Jews, you've got a serious problem. You can't claim this as a Jewish state. Palestinians will vote for representatives. The Knesset will now have many more Palestinians, and maybe even Palestinians can stake a claim to government. And therefore, the Jewish character of the state will go. That's what the Zionists cannot permit. The Zionists want the double nature. They want to pretend it's not a Jewish state, but have a Jewish state. That double character of Zionism in practice is very important. If they declared that it's a Jewish state, they would have a problem. Many years ago, maybe 12 years ago, UN Commission, Economic Commission on West Asia, based in Beirut, ESCWA, released a report, very good report, which was under the leadership of Rima Khalaf, a Jordanian diplomat. She used to be a member of the cabinet in Jordan, extremely good politician. Rima Khalaf, I know her very well. She shepherded this report through the Arab world, including Israel and Turkey, not Iran. It was the greater Arab world, including Israel, Turkey. And what the report said was that two countries in this region were basically violating the UN Charter, because these two countries were ethno-nationalist states. One was Saudi Arabia, and the other was Israel. The Israeli government got so angry, they tried to get her sacked. Eventually, Rima hired Richard Falk, UN Special Rapporteur for the Palestinian territories before, to do a report where Richard said, looking at the legal evidence, very highly distinguished academic, Richard Falk said that Israel is in fact an apartheid state. This is early 2013. And the Israelis got her fired by the Secretary General, Rima Khalaf, senior Jordanian politician. She just published a report which suggested that Israel was apartheid. They got her removed. They need that ambiguity. They don't want to directly declare it's a Jewish state. That's ethno-nationalism. That's what, like Saudi Arabia, they didn't want to be compared to Saudi Arabia. I remember reporting this story. I talked to Amira Haas at Haaretz about it, saying, why don't we do a joint thing? Anyway, that didn't work out. But I remember thinking, the Israelis are super scared to be labeled directly as ethno-nationalist because they want to pretend that they are a liberal democracy. And liberal democracies cannot be ethno-nationalist. They have to have a minority. They have to be able to deal with their minorities. You have to treat minorities decently. Can't have an apartheid ethno-nationalist state. They are very sensitive about it, so they want the Palestinians gone. It's a simple issue for them. If the Palestinians are sufficiently removed, there's no demographic threat to ambiguity. It's not like they want to declare they're a Jewish state. They want to retain the ambiguity. But if they can get 3/4 of the Palestinians to remove, go to Egypt or wherever, then the demographic situation is slightly to their advantage. That's what they're up to. Why do the Yanks back them so much, the Germans? Why are they all involved, sending weapons and so on? What are they afraid of? It's not enough to say the Germans feel guilty because of the Holocaust. It's not enough to say that. It doesn't make sense. What are the Yanks afraid of? What are they guilty of? What are they worried about? Why are they so integrated? And here, geopolitics, all that stuff doesn't help. I'm afraid I'm going to say something that's rather blunt and maybe bizarre, okay? Sorry. But don't underestimate the power of race in international relations. You just can't underestimate the point that they see the Israelis like themselves. It's a little piece of Europe in Asia. Bloody Israel plays in the European Soccer League. I mean, Eurovision is the most horrible music competition because except the year ABBA won. That's the only good year. Yeah? Everybody agrees with me. It's of a certain age, I understand. The rest of you are like, what the hell is that? But Israel participates in Eurovision. Race must be in our discussion of international relations. It's not just about oil and pipelines and beachfront property. They see Israel as themselves. And they see the Arabs on the other side of the international division of humanity. 40,000 Arabs dead, who gives a shit? 5 Israelis dead, it is the worst possible thing. This is just like how the Yanks do the arithmetic of war. 3,000 US people killed. That too, a lot of them were not white. They were people, janitors working in Wall Street and so on, killed in 9/11. And it gives them license to kill tens of thousands, millions of people around the world. It's the arithmetic of racism in the world. One white body is equivalent to hundreds of thousands of black and brown bodies. Don't underestimate this factor. If you try all the other permutations, you don't get it. Why are the Yanks, the Germans, they are all racist. Sorry to say it so bluntly and whatever. Because, you expect somebody of my, travels through the Arab world and so on to have a more sophisticated analysis. And here I come and I'm just saying, it's the white man. And but it is really. It really is. And that's the sad part. I'm going to wind up in a minute. That's the sad part of the whole thing. I can't think of a more compelling explanation than the fact that Biden can say, I'm coming here to negotiate the end of this conflict, and then continue to sell weapons to them and know that they're going to kill more Palestinians. I can't understand Baerbock saying in the German Bundestag, in the parliament, that if there's a civilian and there's a combatant firing near them, the civilian no longer has protection. In fact, that's illegal, what she said. Her statement violates international law because international law says combatants must have extreme caution when firing near civilians. Abundance of caution is a phrase often used. If there's a civilian near a combatant, hold your fire. But the German foreign minister says in the parliament that if Hamas is firing, she used the word Hamas, is firing near civilians, the civilians are a fair target. That is license to the Israelis to commit war crimes. The license given by the one country in the world that should not be giving anybody advice about human rights. If any country should stay silent about this, it's Germany. I don't even want to hear the Germans talk about human rights. They are the people who committed one of the worst atrocities within Europe. One of the worst atrocities within Europe. Maybe the Mongols did a worse atrocity in an earlier period when they swept through. Maybe, I don't know, they made mountains of, who knows? But in modern history, the Germans, unparalleled. What they did to Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, communists, etc. But mainly Jews. No Arab committed a Holocaust. No Arab developed anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was a legitimate practice of thought in German universities. It was within high German scholarship that scholars constructed the debate in the 19th century known as the Judenfrage, the Jewish question. What was the Jewish question, you might ask? The Judenfrage is an atrocious way to approach humanity. The Judenfrage was the following: can Jews be Jews and Germans? Respected chairs at the University of Göttingen and Heidelberg and Jena were debating this racist question. Of course, people can be many things. Of course, we are all many, many multiplicities. It's an absurd question. It's like saying to somebody, can a Sardar be a Sardar and a New Zealander? What kind of question is that? It's an absurd question. That question applies to everybody. Can you be a Maori and a New Zealander? Can you be a white person and a New Zealander? You know, I read a book about New Zealand recently, Cambridge book. They said after World War II, migration came from Britain and New Zealanders were happy. And I was thinking, who the flip are these New Zealanders? Like all of them. And then the next line was, and then the second largest migration came from the Low Countries, who most resembled the British. So New Zealanders were happy. And I was thinking, who's the New Zealanders you're talking to? And what are you talking about when you say New Zealanders were happy about more English people coming here? Yeah, that's the logic of the Judenfrage, which this very liberal writer who wrote the Cambridge history, that was in her head. She's thinking, can you be a New Zealander and a Bengali or a Chinese? You know, is it possible? Maori is a separate issue. Got to live with them, they were already there. But the Palestinians, the Israelis don't have that attitude. Got to live with them, they were already there. No, you can actually tell them to go. It solves our problem. Germany and United States look at Israel and they think we have to defend them against the barbarians. And when Mr. Netanyahu realized that the rest of the world is not going to come with him on Gaza, he expanded to Lebanon because he wants to gaslight you. He wants you to think that this whole genocide against the Palestinians is actually about Iran. And he's dying to get the Americans to hit Iran. He wants a confrontation with Iran. He thinks if Iran can be destroyed, which the Americans could do from the air, like just obliterate Tehran, it's possible. They can do it from the air. This will weaken Iran to the point that Iran finally will go back to its borders, which it had not apparently done since 2003. It will learn to behave itself. The barbarian has to be disciplined. In 1911, when the Italians first dropped bombs in the history of the world, the first aerial bombardment takes place in Italy. In Libya. The Italians aerial bomb in Libya. And then the British aerial bomb in Iraq in 1924. Arthur Bomber Harris, who was the flight commander of the Royal Air Force, wrote a little memorandum for the Royal Air Force where he said something very interesting. He said, there's a couple of reasons why aerial bombardment is so important. Number one, the savage can't fire at us. So we are like God, bringing Promethean fire on them. And because we are like God bringing Promethean fire on them, second point, they fear us. And they need to fear us. Because we need to use aerial bombardment not necessarily to kill them all, but pedagogically. That was his word. We need to use it pedagogically. We have to teach them about our superiority. That, in my opinion, is what they are doing. They are trying to teach the rest of us to behave. This is a lesson for the Chinese. You lesser people, stop producing phones. Behave. We can do this to you. This is a lesson for the Sahel states. Don't think you can have sovereignty. This is a lesson for you. This is pedagogical. The Palestinians are the laboratory for the rest of us. They are telling all of us, if you don't get into line, we're going to get you. And you people in New Zealand joined RIMPAC, sent ships along with the Israelis. And there were just not enough protests on these two islands and many others. Nobody was out there fighting this. Too busy. Not nobody. I said not enough people. I said not enough people. It's not enough people. There needs to be much bigger mobilizations around the Pacific. Because what is this? The pedagogy, you can't be anti what is happening in Palestine and not be afraid of how these islands are going to be used against China. You can't be pro-Palestinian and pro-war elsewhere. You got to put it together. This is imperialism. They think that more than half, we are the lesser people, we need to behave ourselves. If we don't behave, they're going to pummel us. Don't think you can just stay on the Palestine level and everything, this is a good place. Your politics has to expand. We cannot afford these guys to win against the Palestinians. We cannot afford them to win anywhere because it will embolden them to continue this madness of using Promethean fire to keep us in our place. That, in my opinion, is why. Yeah, sorry, I took too long.
Thank you, Vijay. Always so generous, knowledgeable, sharing knowledge. And I love the kind of way that you take us through lots of different things and somehow connect it all together. It's really wonderful. Just a few, it might be useful, I thought, if we had some shared vocabulary. Is that a useful thing? So what do we mean by, and this is just quick definition so we understand where we're coming from. What does Global South mean?
Yeah, these are just words that are referring to things. You can't take them literally. It doesn't mean everything south of something. The Global South, like Third World, refers to people around the world who are continuing to fight for their sovereignty. That's all it means. The people of the Sahel, the people in the Congo, people in larger countries, Brazil, India, whatever, fighting to have a place in the world. That's all it is. There are countries with sovereignty, or at least they think they do, and then there are others who are struggling to get it.
Okay, good. And how would you define for us anti-colonialism?
I suppose anti-imperialism or anti-colonialism, but more anti-imperialism. It's a fight against suffocation. That's how I understand it. That there are these powers who think there's an international division of humanity. And from what they think of as the better side, they should suffocate the people on the other side. It's as simple as that. It's not about economics. It's about attitude. And attitude informs the structure.
Okay, and obviously we're talking about the Global South, Palestine. There's kind of an idea of international solidarity. Can you tell us something about international solidarity as it relates to Palestine? Maybe there's information there that you'd like to impart that this audience maybe doesn't know about. For example, Yasser Arafat and the PLO and their connections to other struggles around the world. A friend of mine has managed to buy and collect several posters made, that celebrates the connection between Vietnam and Palestine, that sort of thing,
Yeah, this is a very interesting issue because in 1948, Palestine is the first issue really that goes to the UN. And I edited a book with Karim Makdisi years ago called The Land of Blue Helmets, the UN in the Arab World. And one of the arguments in the book is The UN was actually born in the crucible of the Palestinian Nakba. That's when the UN was created. All the institutions, the agencies, and so on. Much of international law was created trying to deal with the Nakba. I mean, but the Palestinian struggle didn't start at the Nakba. They were fighting and so on. It starts in Kuwait in 1964, already 16 years after the Nakba, when young students, including Yasser Arafat, create the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And, it's interesting. I don't know if any of you have been to that region. It's tiny. I mean, it really is small. Like when I first saw the Jordan River and the Jordan River Valley, I thought, really, all those biblical events, the mountains look so small. Like I thought they would be, I'm from Asia, the rest of it, I mean, obviously Palestine is in Asia, but from South Asia, the Himalayas and giant rivers, everything looked miniature. And I was like, man, God did so many things there. Like, what about the rest of the planet? Like, it's a little bit like UFOs. They only go to America. They don't show up anywhere else. Like, why are the aliens not coming to New Zealand? Or, why are they not meeting me? Like, I want to meet them. They always go and probe people in America in, like, the cornfields, I would like to be investigated by the aliens. Seems like an interesting experience, I don't know. But, it's a weird thing, right? Yeah. But the Palestinian leadership was very intelligent from 64 onwards. Ghassan Kanafani of the Popular Front. These people understood that the struggle for national liberation is not just the civic struggle or the military struggle. It's a battle of ideas. And in the battle of ideas, they made a really clever decision. They linked the Fedayeen in Palestine to the fighters in Vietnam. So in the early years, all the Palestinian posters had a Fedayeen and a Vietnamese, Viet Cong person there. Yeah? And they said, we are the same struggle. And that was brilliant. The Algerians did the same. The Algerians created a football team, the FLN football team. The FLN football team goes to Vietnam to play a match in Hanoi during the war. They wanted to link with Vietnam. Why? Because we were all, one way or the other, already understanding imperialism through its destruction of Vietnam. We all already knew what imperialism was. The Palestinian leadership was super smart. When people now criticize Yasser Arafat and so on, it annoys me. Because they are criticizing Oslo. But people like Arafat had a whole career. They did incredible things. He made friendships with leaders all over the world. He used to call Indira Gandhi used to call him my big brother. That was incredible. This is a tiny area of the world. Not a large number of people. But it began to define Palestine. Like, look at the number of kafiyas. Palestine began to define and defines our commitment to anti-imperialism. You cannot, from the 60s, it became clear, you could not be on the left. You could not be an anti-imperialist. You could not be part of the third world if you were not committed to the liberation of the Palestinians. We don't have a liberal position on Palestine. I don't believe it. I don't believe we are, make a ceasefire and that's it. We are for the liberation of the Palestinians. We are not just for ceasefire. We are for the liberation of the Palestinians. That means the completion of decolonization. Yeah? So they were able to unite with other political forces to say, we are a national liberation force for decolonization. That was the genius of the PLO. And Kanafani, as one of the main key writers, wrote, he went to China. He wrote a book about China, which has never been translated from Arabic. We are going to translate it. He went and traveled all over the place. in his very brief life before the Israelis brutally murdered him and his 16-year-old niece Lamis, the car bomb in Lebanon, in Beirut. This one guy was building these connections that all of the PLO people were doing, PFLP and so on. But the root thing was solidarity with Vietnam, Palestine, Algeria formed the consciousness of people in their understanding. And Fidel Castro plays such a key role in bringing all these struggles together. Because in 1966, at the Tricontinental meeting in Havana, Castro says the Palestinian struggle is our struggle. And that slogan remains with us till today.
Obviously we can't talk about international solidarity without mentioning Ireland and obviously South Africa. You know, you've been to Ramallah. There's a statue of Nelson Mandela in Ramallah, even before their support of the ICC claim. So what is it about so we've seen in campuses throughout Europe and America this strong pro-Palestinian solidarity movement. Have you got just some final few words before we go to some questions about the response? Why is it so scary for the administration, American administration, that this support is there in campuses across America?
I mean, they should be scared. They understand that it's not just about Palestine. You know, the thing about struggles is predictable struggles have unpredictable outcomes. You join a struggle to prevent an incinerator built in your neighborhood. It's a predictable struggle. Yeah? It has unpredictable outcomes. It radicalizes people. They start thinking, why are they building a trash incinerator in my neighborhood and not a rich neighborhood? Suddenly they start having ambitions of a class struggle. And they start saying, well, why do the rich have a grocery store that sells the better cuts of meat cheaper than my store? All these things start to happen. There are unpredictable impacts of predictable struggles. So the young people now, they invited me for a rally in Washington in November, 1 month after the first month anniversary of this campaign. There were about 80,000 people on the streets in Washington, D.C., the biggest pro-Palestine rally in U.S. history. Man, one Muslim, from these community organizations, but also mosques, one after the other, went out there and said, we are not voting for the Democrats. That was in November, 1 month into the war. They were already saying, that is scary. Because then they start thinking, what's the next demand? You see, when I spoke there, I said, Mr. Biden, you're a war criminal. Yeah, Mr. Netanyahu, you're a bloody war criminal. Your hands are soaked in blood. That was in November. Then people start saying, well, what about other things? Military spending, arms production. Who is actually producing the 2,000-pound bombs? What is the name of the company? We don't want our pension funds invested in that company. These are all pension funds of workers that are invested in weapons companies. Suddenly, this is the unpredictable nature of struggle. So they don't want that. They want passive populations. These people don't really believe in democracy. You see, when people say, I was having a debate with an Australian arms expert in the waiting area for the flight to Auckland. He was going to Sydney. I just happened to talk to him. He was a defense contractor in Australia. But he agreed with me about the waste of military spending and so on. Anyway, but at one point, I asked him, I said, you also agree that, why should they expand Tyndall Air Base in Darwin to put B-52 bombers with nuclear weapons, by the way? Australia is going to do that now. And, you guys should be aware of this. Very extremely provocative. This is like the Chinese are going to be very upset about this, okay? And I don't know where this goes. It's a crazy idea. It violates the Treaty of Rarotonga. So somebody should be doing something about it. Anyway, so I mentioned I was doing this thing, I was like, somebody, blah, blah. And he was like, well, I agree with all that. He says it's a terrible idea to expand the Tyndall Air Base and so on. Then I said, but there's no protests in Australia. And then he started talking about how people in Africa don't believe in democracy. And I was like, why are you talking about Africa? People in Australia and New Zealand, nobody believes in democracy anymore. Because you guys want elections, but you don't want to listen to your constituents. You want the constituents to vote for you, but you don't want them to come and talk to you. So what democracy? You don't have a democracy. I don't believe in this bourgeois democracy at all. It's a joke. United States, there's no democracy. Like when people say, oh, in socialism there's no democracy. I'm like, where has there been democracy in capitalism? What are you talking about? Which member of parliament welcomes you in to come and talk to them about ending arms, Who's like, let's chat, great, let's have a coffee. They are hiding, they have security. What democracy? What democracy? In Cuba, there was an uprising July 11th, a year and a half ago, in a small town outside Havana. People were on the streets, they're very angry. United States said, it's a protest, they're going to overthrow the government. The president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, who is the first Cuban leader to wear jeans, by the way. He likes rock and roll music. I have a great rapport with people that like music that I like. I have a strong line. If I don't like your music, I just can't deal with you. So he and I shared a lot of musical taste. Anyway, he got into his car and he drove himself to this town, parked the car, got out, went around the streets, talked to the people. That's a dictatorship, man. That's a dictatorship. That's exactly what dictators do. They just get in their car in their blue jeans, they drive to a small town, there's people rioting and burning shit, and they just walk around and say, what's going on, people? That's exactly what dictators do. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. Xi Jinping, dictator.
I'm trying to imagine some of our politicians just rocking up to here or just having a sit. David Seymour, yeah. I'll be remiss if I didn't mention that Bharti has been live streaming this, and so you can tell your friends that you can, people that haven't been here tonight, to go to Radio Inqilab, INQILLAB, Inqilab, that's on YouTube, and also you can go to Bharti Kolati Facebook and find the streaming there. I'm presuming it's going to be a recording. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Bharti. We're very quickly coming to the end of time, but we do have about 10 or 15 minutes. What I would like to do, please, is if you can turn to the person on your left and see if you've got a question. Is there a question? Turn to the person you have. You've got 2 minutes to come up with a question.
Everybody doesn't turn to them. You sort of make groups. Yeah?
In 2 or 3 people, turn to, and I would like you, so this is an exercise in concision and clarity. Try out your question on your partner, okay? Try out your question on your partner. Got one? That's nice. That's a nice answer. I love this energy, love this energy. So the whole idea here, Whānau, kia ora whānau, the whole idea here is we're going to try and get really concise and really clear with our questions. So, do you have a question? Okay, good. Now, can you turn to someone else and try your question out on that person? Get really clear with your question, really concise. Narrow it down, make it a really nice, short, pithy question. Shall we field 5 or 6 questions? Yeah. And then
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Have we got some questions? Are we coming back? We're coming back. Is it clear and concise? Have you tried it out on your partner? Is it clear and concise? You tried it out. Is it clear and concise? Sure. Have we got other questions? Anyone else? Questions? Clear and concise? Question, clear and concise? Okay, good. Okay, we might come back then because we're going to wrap up soon. Thank you, everyone. We'll just wait for, just quieting down. Thank you. Coming back into the room. Coming back together. So what we might do is here, if it's okay, we're going to hear 5 or 6 key, nice, concise questions. And let's hear them all, and then we'll see what comes out in terms of answers, okay? I think we have a question there, and then we'll come up to you at the back. Come to you in a second.
So you've brought up how, well, there's been a few, like a few hundred people are protesting in New Zealand. You've pointed out how that is enough. So my question is, how do you think we could organize in New Zealand to not only call for change, but to be in a position to achieve said change?
Okay, thank you. And while I think there was a question at the back there, and while we're waiting, we'll hear one here first. Yep.
Hi, Vijay. So our question here is, India supports Israel, and where does that stand in the international division of humanity? Because, you know, us all being brown people, but also Indians are the 3rd largest ethnicity here in New Zealand. And so what is that relevance in supporting the current conservative government and Israel?
Very good question. And we've got someone back there.
My question is, in New Zealand, the tall poppy syndrome is so severe that the tall poppy syndrome, it's a word that we say for the most humiliating thing you can do here is act like you care about something. Unless it's sport, then that's okay. And in a culture where it is so difficult to get people to care about anything, how do you get people who somehow over the past year, how do you get them to care if they've seen everything over the past year and they're still not there yet?
Very good, thank you. And maybe one more, we'll hear one more here.
Hi, my question actually related to a lot of other questions that is relevant to New Zealand. But I start with your opinion about the UN. What is the role of the UN in this whole madness? And then the real question I have is actually, what can we do in New Zealand? And one thing that I think New Zealand can do for us to focus on is to get our government to recognize Palestine as a country. It's one of the few countries in the world that doesn't do it. Now, having think about of it as a concrete action that we can do, then I question what is the relevance of it, whether it's worthwhile for us to put our energy into this cause.
Thank you very much. I think we've probably had five or six questions. Is that enough for the time? Because we don't have the time to get to all of them. Is that enough? No. I think she asked you a question, I think. No, it was not. Oh, it wasn't? Okay. Please make it quick.
My question is, if the nuclear arsenal, the 3rd largest one in the whole world, that's sitting under the baby killer in Israel, gets blown up because Iraq or the neighbors get fed up and something happens, and then we get a nuclear winter all over the planet that jeopardizes everyone and turns all of us into mutants that are inferior. Can you comment on that?
Is that enough questions? One more? One more?
What's your opinion on the BRICS meeting going on at the moment, as there's so many global south countries there, and will that make a difference for imperialism and therefore Palestine?
Same.
Okay, I think we've got enough questions. Hey, we've only got 10 minutes or so. 10 minutes, you have to answer all of those.
Well, the 2nd and 7th are the same question, really. I mean, India actually doesn't support Israel. That's the interesting thing. The Indian government doesn't support Israel. The Indian government's stated position, which they repeated recently, is a 2-state solution, which is the same position as the NAM, the non-aligned movement. Modi personally has some sort of equation with Netanyahu, but the government hasn't said we support the war. And this is a very important distinction, because in 13 months, the Indian government at no point has said we support what the Israelis are doing. They have said repeatedly 2-state solution. The war has to end, two-state solution. And Modi repeated it in Kazan. Two-state solution, ceasefire. He told Putin, we want to broker the deal with you and Ukraine. India is trying to be the peacemaker in the BRICS. The BRICS summit is really vital. And I was really interested to see how well the New Zealand Herald covered it. It was amazing. It was amazing coverage. I'm surprised they didn't tell you what they were eating for breakfast or, like, it is incredible. I mean, what you guys really need, I'm sorry to repeat this, I said it this morning as well when Emmy and I were doing the conversation, is you really need a good news website. A New Zealand-oriented, left-wing website. Because, I mean, all these things like don't care, how do you organize, this is all related to what is the point of unity. When the old social democrats in Russia before they became Bolsheviks and so on, they had a big debate in the late 19th century. And Lenin writes a really important book, What is to be Done? And in What is to be Done, Lenin says, we need a newspaper. It's going to be called Iskra. And Iskra is going to be the uniting force of all the different left little groups that don't communicate well with each other. WhatsApp is not enough. Email groups not enough. You need a front-facing portal because your media is really crap. I mean, it is really, really bad. And what's interesting is everybody I talk to says, oh, I get my news from watching YouTube. I watch, some Americans or, I watch Democracy Now. Why are you watching American YouTubers? Why aren't you producing your own view of the world? I mean, that's a sign of extreme lack of self-confidence. If a people don't believe they should have their own media. And that too, you're watching like the American left, which is hardly the leading intellectual force on the planet. Yeah? It's extraordinary that you rely on YouTubers and so on from the US. It's bizarre. Yeah? You should be building your own media. I mean, all of you should have a stake in putting together just a website with regular articles, well-reported, short pieces. I'll help you. I will help you do it. But you need to do it, And that is going to really help many of these questions. Because I cannot tell you how to get people to care or how to organize in New Zealand. Because this is my second day here. And it's crazy for me to have ideas about what to do here. How do I know? You know. So you should be writing and you should be debating and organizing and discussing. Yeah? And you should also ask the question of your own people, why don't you care? You should write an article on the website called Why Don't the People of New Zealand Care? And start a debate and a discussion and so on. So I would propose that as one little way forward. Now, the United Nations is an incredible organization because it's not just the Security Council. It's all the agencies. If there were no UN, the Palestinians would not have survived as a people from 1948. UNRWA, UNESCO, UNICEF. UNICEF provides immunizations in all the camps. UNRWA provides schools in all the camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, all over the place. Of course, in the occupied territories. Those teachers are incredibly brave. The UN officials on the ground, UNIFIL in South Lebanon, the Irish and Indian soldiers are being attacked now by the Israelis. They have been holding the blue line since the Israeli defeat at the hands of Hezbollah in 2000. So the UN actually is extremely vital. I think it's wrong for us to debate the UN as if it's just the Security Council. There are thousands of brave UN officials from all countries, including your country, who serve to try to help migrants and this and that. Nobody else is there. When I was in Agadez, Niger, the International Organization of Migration, UN agency, goes to check and make sure that the people trying to cross the Sahara have water and things like that, because people die. I was mad enough to attempt that crossing. It's insane. There's no roads, you're driving in the desert. There's bandits all over, it's madness. UN officials are making sure people don't die of dehydration. But Security Council can't move. The Security Council is only as good as the members on it. It's not the UN. It's the P1 or P2. Permanent member number 1, United States, basically controls everything. They set the agenda. That is why the Kazan summit and so on is so important. I mean, firstly, there is no African permanent member of the Security Council, not one. There is no Latin American member of the Security Council, not one. And stupid England, which is a worthless piece of shit country, is on the Security Council with a permanent seat. And even worse, bloody France, which nobody likes, from New Caledonia to Niger. Everybody hates the French imperialists. How come they have a seat? They don't even have a country. They've got protests every day there. How are they going to help bring order in the world? Macron was spat upon when he went to Oran in Algeria. How did they have a seat? The French should give up their seat to an African country. The Latin Americans should have a seat. And it's only just, in historical terms, for England to withdraw and one of the South Asian countries, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, take that seat. Or the ambassador from England should be Bangladeshi. Because anyway, London is a Bangladeshi city. You see, if they won't give up, we're going to invade them. Already we're taking over New Zealand. You know, when they said after World War II, the people from Britain came and it was great, they were welcomed. And then the Dutch came and people said, well, they like the British. And then came the Indians. And then even worse, came the Bangladeshis. And then they start to flow in. The rising tide of color. It was a book by American racist, 1920. Some Stoddard something. The rising tide of color. But I'm serious. UN reform is a key thing. Why should the Yanks set the agenda? Just because they have the biggest military in the world, that's hardly the UN Charter. They violate the UN Charter all the time. Last question, really. I mean, I don't think the Arab states are so crazy. Like the Iranians, not an Arab state, not crazy enough to fire on Israel's nuclear arsenal. Iran is extremely judicious. This time when they fired on Israel, they only fired on military bases where there actually weren't that many personnel. Iran does not want a full-scale war with the Israelis because they don't want to get Tehran bombed by the Yanks. They are super cautious about this. So I don't think the mad people here are the Arabs. No, I'm just saying I don't think they're going to fire at Israel and ignite the nuclear arsenal. Will Israel fire a nuclear bomb? No, I really don't think anybody except the United States and Israel want to pursue this to the end. But I'm not sure anybody wants to actually fire a nuclear bomb. I don't think so. I think they are using this to intimidate people. Like bringing B-52 bombers to Tyndall. Well, that I don't know. We don't know that. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, whether Israel will be a democratic state. That is very far into the future. But right now, I don't think any neighboring country is going to act. And I want to say one thing about the neighboring countries, because this recognizing Palestine is an interesting issue. There is actually a lot that New Zealand can do. I mean, there's a lot the country has done negatively. Like joining AUKUS was an incredibly ridiculous thing to have done. The only good thing about AUKUS was that you pissed the French off. And that made me happy. That was the only good thing. But that was like a side, the side of fries. It wasn't the real thing. AUKUS was a really bad idea. Going for RIMPAC, really bad idea. But then again, New Zealand has had some really bad ideas since 1951. The San Francisco Treaty was a really bad idea because you are a frontline state. And why do you want to become Ukraine? Like, do you really want to be the proxy for US ambitions? Do you really want this island to become the staging post for an invasion of China? I mean, that's a choice the people of New Zealand have to make. And somebody needs to put forward a referendum, people's referendum, to start campaigning a people's referendum saying, do we want to be a frontline state in the war against China? Put it to the people. Challenge the Green Party to take it up in Parliament. Motion before the Prime Minister, a member's privileged motion or whatever the hell they say. Yeah? Do we want to become a frontline state in the US war against China? Yes or no? Let's ask the population. Very good pedagogical exercise. I would ask a Green Party legislator to take it up in the Parliament. Let's see what happens. That will create a lot of mischief. There will be a lot of people on TV saying, this is a mischievous thing that the Green Party is doing because they are trying to involve the people in national security. And national security matters I can't do a New Zealand accent, but what they're saying is national security must not be brought to the people because it's not a democracy and we don't believe in democratic national security. And the people are too stupid because they don't understand why we are hook, line, and sinker with Lockheed Martin and Boeing and so on. We can't afford to have this conversation in public. This is a conversation only allowed with cigars and cognac and real men in suits sitting in closed rooms and so on with names like Seymour and Harris and whatever, etc.
Thank you very much, Vijay. That was very good. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for your knowledge, your generosity. I'm going to ask someone from PSNA. I think we have a small gift for you just to say thank you from Maher.
Thank you. Thank you on behalf of PSNA. Thank you on behalf of Palestinians in the country and Ottawa, this is New Zealand. Thank you.
And I think we're going to close now. We've got a waiata.
We'll just do should I do the karakia? Okay. I'll just do the karakia to close. Kia inoi tātou. He whakaitanga e tēnei te kaupapa kua e. Tēnei te wānanga kua e. Te mauri o te kaupapa ka whakamoia. Te mauri o te wānanga ka whakamoia. Ko ki ronga, ko ki raro, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. E hara I te mea, no naenei te aroha, ngō ngā tūpuna, I tuku iho, utuku iho. Kia ora tātou. Pō Mārie.